Hi everybody, today we're going to be talking about constructing section elevation drawings. So what I have on my workspace is a copy of your mystery plan, but no, my hand is not ginormous. I have reduced it by half, so what I'm working with is 1/8 inch scale. You will be doing yours at 1/4 scale. I just reduced it so I could show it more easily on my workspace. So you'll need the design ideas you come up with so far in plan view. You're going to need your front elevation view of the house at 1/4 scale. Again, mine is at 1/8 scale. Then, in order to pick up the topography, you're going to need to construct a grid like this. So all I've done is constructed these axes, and then I just laid my 1/8 inch scale down and I ticked off foot increments. Right? And typically you would do this for however many feet of elevation change you have on a project, right? You find the highest elevation, you find the lowest elevation, then you put in that many increments. In this case, I just did a few more just to show you, but we don't have that much of grade change, especially the views that we have to show on this one. So like I said, I've done mine at 1/8 inch scale. You will do yours at 1/4 inch scale, so your grid will look like this, so just twice as big really. I like to do them on separate sheets like this because then I save them. It doesn't take long at all to construct this, but if I don't have to do it every time I have a project, even better, right? So the other thing you're going to need is a little scratch piece of paper. So let me grab one really quickly. All right, and then what we want to do here is pick up the elements that are on the ground and the things that we want to be able to represent in our section elevation, at least what we have. Now, your first decision though, would be to figure out where along your plan are you going to take this short elevation. The farther back you go, you'll be able to show more. But keep in mind that with the section elevation, everything really gets smooshed into one plane. So you're not going to be able to show everything super clearly. So if you think about what the purpose of this drawing is, and in this project, we're really concerned with all the vertical elements that we're putting in the yard. How does it look? How is it going to look with the house behind? Is it okay to block the house? We want to keep it open. Part of that are your goals, right? So I would take mine somewhere down here, especially the only, major vertical elements I have for this elevation would be this arbor here at the entrance. And then, some of these other trees or larger plant material that I put in. I just want to see what it's looking like with the house. So let's just say I'm going to take it here, but I know that I'm going to want to show those retaining walls in the back. This. So I block them out. So this is the width of the retaining wall right here. And I just have my own little annotation system because it can get confusing, particularly if you have a site that has a lot of topographic change and you're going to have a lot of tick marks. It's easier for me to keep straight what things are. So right now I just want to grab really the retaining walls and the house. So I'm just going to come up and just get where the edge of the house is. And again, I put my little cheat sheet right next to it. So there's a corner. And I make a note, house edge. And then the same thing over here, house edge. And the reason why I like doing the walls first is like if my paper happens to move around, I can easily line it back up again, which I would do a lot. All right, so the other thing, we have a spot elevation here at the bottom of the steps at 100. So I like putting that on there too, because that'll just help me figure out how to set the house elevation. So I'm going to make a little mark saying this is 100 at the steps. Okay, so those are the things that are already in the site. Now let's pick up some topo. Let's just say I want to pick up what the ground is doing right where the edge of this paper is, right? So I line my walls back up. And again, they're in the distance. They're up here, but I've got my property line here, my property line here, so I just put them in there. So now what you want to do is wherever a contour line hits your piece of paper, that's where the contour line is going to be. So let's see if I can do this at the same time so you can see. So you can see the 102 comes, and wherever it hits the paper, boom, that's where it goes on your cheat sheet, and you make a little note, that's 102. The next one is 101, so you make a note of that. And then we have 100 where the steps are, and then this is also 100 down where we're cutting the section. All right, so the other thing we need to note is we've got to go back up to this note up here that says the top of the wall is at 103.5. So I'll make a note on my cheat sheet. Top of wall is at 103.5, and the bottom of the wall was at 101.7. Okay, so we have our notes. We need to get now a new piece of trace paper. So let me do that. My beautiful canary trace. I tried to order more this weekend, and some sellers, their version of canary is not really canary. So, and just FYI, sometimes this will help you know when you pull trace paper off of the roll, it will always curl up on you like this because it's been curled up for a really, really long time. The way to avoid that is once you tear it off, just flip it over, and now it will lay flat. It's magic, magic. Okay, so now we want to start constructing a section. So I'm going to move my paper back down to about where I want it. Actually, I'm going to put my trace over. Think about this really quickly. Okay, this is actually what I want to do. Put my trace over my grid, and I'm going to start plotting these points. So my wall on the far side, let's see if you can see this, is at the top of the wall is at 103.5. So I come over here to my 103, follow it over. Zip, 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 zip. Sound effects always help. So 103.5, and then the wall is exactly that big, right? So that's the top of my wall, and it goes to 101.7. So 101.5 is here for me. 101.7 is going to be a smidge above. You guys will be able to show that much better on your 1/4 inch plan. Okay, so there's the wall on the right side of the property, and then the neighbor's yard kind of goes up a little bit from there as far as we know. Now we go and plot the rest of the points. So 102, exactly where it is on the paper, you come straight up and you line it up with the 102 line. See, so there's 102, and we plot it there. The house edge is here, so we don't need to really worry about that now, but I want to kind of just draw it in so I remember how to line up my house. Then 101 is the next point we have. We put that there. The middle of the steps was at 100. The contour line on the ground farther up in the yard was also at 100. The other house edge was here. Oops, hang on, sorry. You're not here to tell me I'm off the screen. Doot. The other house edge is here. And then the only notation for this wall was the top is flush with our yard, right? So we only have a point of 100, and then we know it just sort of goes down from there. So I'm just going to say the wall is a little bit less than 100, right? It's not really, doesn't have to be exact here. Then you just connect the dots, right? So we have our wall here. The ground comes up here. The middle of the steps is there. Comes up. It's coming up. And then it's a little flat where the drive is. Okay, so it looks a little wonky. Not to worry, that's why it's on trace, it's a draft. So then you can line up the house, right? So again, those lines that I extended up are the corners of the house, so we're going to put it there. We also know that the middle of the steps was at 100, And so it's going to look something like this. Now it looks a little wonky because I'm taking elevations from farther down in the yard, and what's shown on your drawing is the land right up at the house, right? So there's going to be some zhuzhing involved. Not a problem at all, not that important. But you do want to get the house edges lined up, and you want to get this pretty close. Then I just hold it down, and maybe you do this with pencil. I just like to outline the house and the doors and the windows. There's no need to draw a lot of detail here, right? So I'll show actually the two roofs. This is the porch roof that I'm drawing now. Make sure you can see it. And then we've got these weird columns. And again, I'm freehanding it. It does not have to look great, but we want to make sure all those vertical elements that we might be putting in the plan, sometimes, you know, lining them up with the house architecture or offsetting it becomes really, really important. So we have to know where those elements are. Put in a few more of the roof lines. All the way down, all the way down. Let's put this in. I'll put in the chimney. All right, and then, like I said, we'll put in the door. Here's the porch. So you notice this is the porch, this double line that's shown, and then this is just showing the separation between the foundation and the house siding. All right, so that's why it's just a single line and a little bit lighter. Oops, moving around a little bit. So there's the windows, 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 and then let's put this guy in just for giggles. Okay, so not beautiful, but boom, it's there. Oh, let me put in the steps. Doop. So also porch here, cheek walls, steps. All right, so here's the section across our site. Now if you wanted to, you could assume that this retaining wall is going to do the same thing just off our property as this one is doing here. So it probably comes down, and then their driveway is right there. Okay, so now we get to play with the design elements, and this should be the fun part. Of course, I think everything is fun. So we have this. I have this arbor down at the bottom, and it's a little wide. So this is a 5-foot wide walkway, big poured in place concrete steppers, whatever. Maybe it's stone if the family has money. But what I want to look at now is what kind of arbor, what shape and size should that arbor be to look good with the house. So just over here, like you can draw it right on top. Sometimes I like to do things off the page a little bit. So I just, like, nothing is taped down, right? Again, things start to be a waste of time. Those drafting dots, super expensive. So I'm just going to say, let's start with a 8-foot arbor. So I just drew 8 feet, and we want to have it 5 feet wide, and pull that up to the 8-foot line. And maybe I want it a flat top. Hang on, there, now I'm drawing it so you can see. So, and then like if you just started to give it some mass, like nothing is going to be like a single line ever, right? So there's one version of an arbor, right? So now if we put that in front of our house, because we don't have a lot of grade change, that would look like this in front of the house. So that's actually not too terrible, right? It doesn't compete with the architecture. It could be made out of similar materials as the house. It could be the same color as the house. So that's one idea. But what if we decided to make something jazzier? So let's stay, actually I'm going to make this next one a little bit smaller on the sides. So like only 7 on the sides because it's going to have a peak to it. So we don't want it to get like too crazy tall. That would just feel weird. 5 feet, 7 feet here, and then, sorry, there. Now it has a peak, something like this. And they would have things there. Maybe there's like a cross piece here. So still 7, right? This is 7 feet tall. So that's the size of a door, the height of a door. So it's still plenty big. So now what does that look like in front of the house? that also looks okay, right? Would it look weird? Like, what if you have an offset entry? What happens if it's there? Is that okay? Or is that a bad idea? So that's where you get to start making some decisions, right? So other things that would be really helpful to put in, and the reason why I don't put a lot of detail on this house at the moment is because I also don't want to put a lot of time into drawing it beautifully if what I'm proposing in the design is going to obscure a lot of that, right? So that's why I just kind of blocked it in. You don't even have to. You could also just tape it to the back of your trace, right? Just to see. However you want to save yourself some time is fine. So the other things that we want to put in is that big oak is here. So here's that trunk. It's tall. Oops, sorry. Moved it off my paper. I can't see. All right. So that oak is right here. And it's because we know that it's like a 24-inch trunk, it's going to be big. And we have the canopy here. So let's go ahead and get that from there. So it's like this. So that it's a big tree, right? So you don't need to show the whole tree, but just the bottom of the canopy. And again, I'm just blocking things in because I want to see how everything starts to layer together, right? There's no point in drawing everything really beautiful at this point. It's a waste of time. So the other thing we should put in is, guess what? The other tree, right? So on the neighbor's property, even though it's on the neighbor's property, it impacts our project, right? So again, the tree trunk comes right down there. I just brought it down. Sometimes if I think my eyes are wonky, I'll just put a scale there to just say, okay, yeah, it's there and there. And then I just pop it up. And I'm not measuring, I just know it's a big tree, right? So, and I'm extending it out to like the canopy limits that are on the plan. Again, super loose graphics. I will make it gorgeous later, right? And then just so I can really see the tree. What happened to my tree? I think it's sick. A little bit of bulge in the middle. Okay. All right. So now that you can see that that's really starting to define some space, and that tree canopy becomes really, really important. So other things you can play with is some of you are doing an outdoor seating, eating area here. You'll have to give careful consideration to how hot or shady you think it's going to be, or if you want to give the family some protection from rain so they could still be outside. This is a great way to figure out what that roof line should be. If you say, okay, we want to follow the roof line out and bring it over down here, that starts to get really low, right? So on the short side, we only have a 4 foot tall, it's only 4 feet, right? So someone who's like 6 feet, let's put our scale in, 5, 6, would start knocking their head here, right? Not cool, right? So then you have to start figuring out, okay, well, maybe it would be better to stay at that height, but now maybe it's a flat roof, right? And so this is a really great place to play with heights, right? So that's a little tall, but it's not terrible. Thankfully, the house is a small house, so we're only at 9 feet there. So that's doable, right? Especially maybe they drop some little white lights and that kind of brings the size down a little bit, however you want to do it. Maybe you have, it's a standalone, it's not connected to the house, but you have another post out here and you do another repeated pitch, that's fine. Maybe you do a single sloped roof, right? And then this post would come up here. And if that's the case, you could make it a little bit shorter because that starts to get a little bit tall, right? So you can see the value of this, right? So these section elevations should be design tools where they're rough drawings. You're trying to figure out what things look like. I like, if I have both structures, where'd my other ones go? Let's just say we liked let's stay with the pointy one, right? Let's go ahead and say, okay, I'm gonna stay with my pointy idea. But this one, because I have a straight walkway, it lines up with the door, which is pretty nice. I don't think it competes. We already have like repeated roof structures here, so to have one more, actually not a big deal, but it would look weird if it was a little off kilter, right? So now maybe we do want to go back to this peaked one over here, like this. So I'll just keep drawing it until it reads heavier, or I'll grab a thicker pen, however that works. So that's starting to look good in my mind. So now I can just keep layering and seeing what things look like. I have a fence right at the right-of-way line, or just inside, right? And so I can play with, what if that's a 4-foot fence? And I'm just going to put in 4 because I know I wouldn't want something taller. And I went ahead and I drew in the posts. We'll talk about construction in a couple weeks. But let's see, I have it going all the way over to the drive. So that would end up looking like, you know what, I'm going to change colors so I can see it better. Yeah, black. Awesome. Okay. You folks have no idea how often I talk to myself, and it's actually a really good conversation. All right, so hang on. Let me pick up post, post, post. Oh, I made it too narrow. Okay. Post, post, post. And so I don't know what the fence would look like. If it's just like a picket fence, it would look like this across the front. And then I actually wanted my arbor to be a little wider because I want the front walkway to be nice and wide. So that actually I think looks better because now it's in front of the columns of the house. And it goes all the way over like this. Okay, so then the thing that I haven't really accounted for is I've just done stepping stones along the curb, and then 2 big steppers that start the walkway up to the house, and then this would just be cool meadow, right? So something that is pretty low maintenance, and that would go all the way over from property edge to the walkway, and then on the other side of the walkway to the drive. So now let's forget the plan underneath for a second. And on that same line, right, you're going to want to do like a perspective thing. It's not. I'm just going to show some cool squiggles, right? My caffeinated squiggles, or like this grassy cool idea. And of course there'd be like different things, some tall things that come up and create some interest. Maybe there's some short grasses and then it gets tall, and then some other short grasses, tall, however, and then the same cool surprises. So it's starting to look like that. So now it's like, okay, I put in some vertical elements, still looking okay. Let's keep going. If you look onto the plan back here, I thought about putting in like a tree here. I can't remember, one of you the other day had a tree right outside this window, and I think that's a really lovely idea. So if you're in the dining room looking out, if you're on the porch looking out, this could be a really, really attractive tree. Maybe it's a dogwood or a redbud or a paperbark maple or something. That would look really beautiful. But let's see what it looks like from the road. So I just, lined it up, and again, everything is smushed together in a section. That's probably the really weird thing for you, Margie, is that we don't have perspective, so everything is true to size, right? So if it's like a smaller tree, let's say we would want the canopy to be no shorter than 7 feet. And I'm just looking at where I brought it down, because we want maybe people to be able to walk under it, possibly. Zoop, 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 zoop. And this tree, you would show the whole tree. And I actually kind of like this, because if there was any weird shenanigans between the roof lines, the tree canopy would help to kind of soften that juncture. Like that. All right, so you can start to see how that's looking. That looked pretty cool, right? So you might have other plans in there that wouldn't actually be there, but you can't show every single thing. It would just make the drawing too cluttered. So you do get to take some artistic license here and only show most of what you're doing, right? Again, you also don't have to show everything because you'll have another section that you can pick some things up at. So along those lines too, you'd have some screening here. It might be that the fence, when it gets farther back, does go up to a 6-foot fence. And maybe you do have like some screening plants back here, right? And that starts to give some definition. When you look at this and you're like, okay, well, that's really heavily planted. This edge starts to look a little weird because we don't have a lot of room. But maybe you could say, because these people are friends, I'm gonna see if they'd be cool with adding some plants on their property. And it's not that they would do that just because their plan seems unbalanced, but just as a cool continuity thing. And they might have different light conditions, like, you know, my neighbors and I are talking about just like sharing a blueberry border between our properties because frankly, I don't want to see their house. They're super nice people, but I don't want to see their house and cars all the time. So we could go like halves on some property line plantings, and that would just make everything look good together. All right, so this is the basic idea for a section elevation. When you go the other way, you would just want to think very carefully about where to show that elevation, right? And so you want to take it from at least the front of the house to the curb, or if you're trying to pick up this entertainment space, if you're putting one over here, you might want to take your elevation all the way through here so you can pick that up. So then it would be longer than some other people's sections, and that's fine. Again, you have the choice of which way you would want to have your viewers look, this way or this way. You can choose either one, but I would say what's important is creating this screen along here. And when you pop it up into section elevation, you'll start to see where there are errors. So some of you, the other day I talked about, if you have some fence and then you have some plantings, right? If you do that, but you leave this fence bare, a lot of times that's where the eye goes. And you don't necessarily know that's happening unless you quickly pop up an elevation to see it from the side. And then you say, oh, I don't want the fence to be that much of a focus. So we want to soften it. So that should be your key, that you should maybe come in, add some more plants, maybe you add a vine, anything to soften that. But you don't necessarily understand that that's what you've done until you show it in section. So that's why throwing these drawings up super rough, just to see what it is you're creating, is really helpful, right? Then if things are not the way you envision, you go back and you fix the plan, you fix the elevations. So by the time you're done, everything is super well thought out and all the drawings relate to one another. Sound good? Excellent.